Hello guys, this is Scott from Nostalgic Nightmares and welcome to my review of Goosebumps Horrorland number 2, Creep from the Deep. I just want to give a quick shout out to Goosebumps Guy. You were the first guy to comment on any of my videos, so I really appreciate that. That's made me feel like I'm actually doing videos that people are actually going to listen to, so that makes me feel really good. So thanks for commenting and following. And I've watched your video as well, and I love the Canadian accent, so keep up the good work. But yeah, so this is Creep from the Deep. I'm going to try and keep this review, hopefully, I say hopefully, a little bit shorter than my last two, because my last two videos have been about an hour and 10 minutes each, and that's quite a long time for a review, so I'm going to try my best to keep this a little bit shorter, but I'm not making any promises, because I tend to talk, and time just gets away with me, because I'm not staring at a clock while I do this. So I wait till near the end, and I look at the clock, and I go, oh shit, I've been talking for an hour. So yeah, anyway, number 2, Creep from the Deep, is a sequel to obviously Deep Trouble and Deep Trouble 2, which were in the original Goosebumps series. As far as I'm aware, this is like the only other book that's been in the Deep Trouble series from the beginning of Deep Trouble to the most recent book that's been released. I actually have a bit of a soft spot for the Deep Trouble series, and it's not so much the books as it is the TV show episode. It's not the best episode, I know that for a fact, but the reason I've got quite a soft spot for it is because, as I mentioned in previous videos, my best friend growing up, Rachel, who's still my best friend now, and we lived on Goosebumps, but basically, we always stayed in stayed in her room when I was at hers playing games and stuff, but there was one day, randomly we had the house to ourselves, so we were down in the living room. We must have been about 10, maybe at the time, something like that. And we were downstairs playing lots of games in the living room, which was really unusual for us, because obviously the living room was like where the parents sit and chat, so we don't ever go in there. But we had the TV on, because I knew that Goosebumps was coming on the TV. And at this point, I thought I'd seen every episode. So we played some games, then I think it was Fox Channel or something like that, said that Goosebumps was about to come on, and they mentioned like a beach or a seaside or something. So I was like, oh, it's going to be the Ghost Beach episode, which I'd already seen, so I was like, well, we'll carry on playing, but we'll have it on in the background. And as it started, I looked towards the screen and it came up saying Deep Trouble, and I was literally like, it's what I've not seen! And I was like scrambling towards the TV and sat like directly in front of the TV to watch it. So yeah, it's only like a small story and not the most exciting story. But yeah, so I just have a little bit of a soft spot for Deep Trouble just because it was such an excitement watching an episode that I hadn't seen before. In terms of the actual books themselves, the original two, I don't remember much about them other than they're not very supernatural, if I believe correctly. They're based on I know there's like mermaids in them, but from what I can remember, which is not a lot, it's mostly about like fishing hunters or fish chemicals that grow fish really large, like in the TV show. I'm not too sure, but anyway, number 2, Creep from the Deep, is 100 pages long for the actual story. Again, if you've not watched my video for Revenge of the Living Dummy, I'm not going to review the Horrorland section until later on in the series when I review the Horrorland as a whole. And it has 27 chapters in the Creep from the Deep. So getting straight into it, we are reintroduced to the same characters from the last two, who are Billy and Sheena, who once again are going to stay with their uncle Dr. Deep. Why they keep going to stay with him is anyone's guess, because every time they go there, they get into life or death situations and almost get killed. But yeah, we start off meeting Billy again, and he has this like superhero persona that he calls himself the undersea mutant, and he like pretends to wrestle fishes and underwater monsters and stuff, but it's all fake. And he's talking to Dr. Deep, who is teaching him how to, do you know like when they go fishing in the ocean and they throw spears into the ocean? So he's teaching him how to use the fishing spear for that purpose. And there's a whole joke where he pretends to hit, or Sheena pretends she's been hit by it, but she hasn't. But yeah, this fishing spear is, what's the word for it? There's a word for when they introduce something in a book or a TV show, which is something like really minuscule but becomes like really important to the story later on. The closest I can think of mentioning for you Goosebumps fans is in One Day at Horrorland. What I can remember is the brother, is it Clay or Luke? I can't remember which one's the brother and which one's the friend. He has this pinching fascination, he likes to pinch people, and obviously that becomes a big thing later on where to defeat the horrors you have to pinch them, which is really, really convenient. And the only other one I can remember is actually from the Horrorland series later on, which is in The Mummy Walks, which is about this guy who has this trick that he does, or is it the girl? One of them. One of the siblings has a trick that they do, which they do at the start of the book to annoy each other, and later on in the book, that's kind of how they defeat the bad guys. I won't say too much because I don't want to give it away. So yeah, the fishing spear is like an important part to... They only ever mention it briefly at the start, but it actually becomes quite an important part to the story later on. So, foreshadowing. Ooh. Anyway, Dr. Deep, who is a marine biologist, has for some reason decided to have an interest in treasure hunting, because that's what all fishing experts do, I guess. They become treasure hunters. Yeah, so he's got this kind of equipment on his boat, which is like acoustic imaging, which for anyone who doesn't know is like where they send out like sound waves, and when they reflect back, it kind of gives you a picture of what you're looking at, which is how dolphins communicate. They only communicate through sending out sound waves, and they can judge by getting the sound waves back into their ears how far away things are and things like that, and if things are moving. So he's got all this acoustic imaging and laser mapping, and he's searching for this particular sunken pirate ship. And the basic story of this ship is in the 1780s, this one major badass of a pirate called Captain Ben One Leg, he was this really mean pirate, and he had all this millions worth of jewels and gold on his ship, and he was so mean he would like throw sailors into like a pit of rats for fun, and he would just kill sailors just when he got bored, just for something to do. And so Dr. D wants to look for this sunken pirate ship. Basically the story behind the ship disappearing was they were floating along on a clear day, and there was another pirate ship coming for them. They were going to have like a battle because the other pirate ship wanted to get the booty off them. And out of nowhere, this black cloud swept over the sea and swallowed up Captain Ben One Leg's ship, which I think is called the Scarlet Skull. Yeah. And the ship was disappeared into this cloud, and from that day on, no one ever knew where it was. It was never seen again. And so there's kind of a myth that some say that because Captain Ben One Leg was so evil, the sea just kind of swallowed him up to kind of protect the world from its evil. But no one really knows the full story of where the ship went or where it's gone. It kind of reminds me of like the Bermuda Triangle, which is a place in the ocean where boats go through and they never come out. And as far as I'm aware, no one fully knows why, which is really spooky to know that we know so much about this Earth. And but there's this one spot that we don't really know what's going on. But I haven't read a lot about it recently, so they might have figured this out. But I don't know. So Dr. Deep wants us to look for this sunken pirate ship, because he believes if he finds his ship, he's going to find the treasure that's on board, and he wants to donate it to like a dolphin fund, because Dr. Deep, if I remember from the other books, he wants to like find these hidden things and rescue like mermaids and stuff, but never wants it for like his own personal use. He actually just wants to help people. And there's rumours about the ship that the skeletons that were on board, or the sailors that were on board, are now zombies, and yeah, so there's this kind of spooky myth about the ship, but no one knows where it is. But Dr. Deep thinks he knows where he can find it. So he's found the location of it, basically. That's where the book starts. He thinks he's found the location. And he's going to go down in this mini submarine and go scout it out and have a look at it. So I've got back to saying so again, haven't I, all the time. Billy and... what's her name? Sheena. Billy and Sheena go in the submarine with him. And it's only big enough for like the three of them. It's really tiny, so it's like a little round thing. And they sink down to the ocean floor, and they sink and they sink and they sink. And out of nowhere, the power just shuts off, and they're stuck at the middle of the ocean, or the bottom of the ocean, with no power and nowhere to go. And they're all obviously getting really scared and trying to get the power to start working, and asking Dr. Deep, what's going on? And out of nowhere, how they see this, I'm not really too sure. But a black cloud appears out of nowhere in the ocean and sweeps over the submarine, and Dr. Deep just disappears out of nowhere. I mean, I'm not sure why the cloud only takes him and not the other two. And I'm assuming the cloud comes into the submarine. That's the only way they could have possibly seen it. Because if they have no power, they've got no lights. If they've got no lights at the bottom of the sea, you won't be able to see jack shit. So Dr. Deep disappears, or Dr. D as they call him, and obviously they're panicking. They're trying to get the radio to work to try and communicate with someone at the surface to be like, we're stuck in the submarine with two kids, we have no idea how to drive it, and we're the one person who did know how to drive it has literally just disappeared. So they tried to get the ship working, the submarine working, and they get some power to it, which is good. And they're trying to navigate it around the ocean floor. And out of the darkness comes the pirate ship, and they actually crash into the side of the pirate ship that they're looking for, and crash into it. They break through the side of it, and they're floating around inside. And they're looking out of the portholes of the submarine into the darkness of the ship, and out of nowhere this skull floats up to the window and knocks against the window. And then this banging against the window the skull actually kind of comes to life, and the skeleton attached to it comes to life. And you just start hearing this banging on the side of the submarine, and the skeleton kind of trying to bang on the window. And they look in another porthole, and another skull appears. And as they're looking around, they see all these skeletons floating up out of the sea, and all floating towards the submarine, and they're all banging on the side of the submarine, which is really a scary image if you think about it. Not only are they stuck in the middle of the ocean, but all these skeletons have appeared, and they're literally trying to bang on the window, trying to break through to get into them. And they're just banging, and they're banging. And they're trying to get the ignition to work on the submarine, and they're pulling on it, and they're like, come on, we want to get out of here, they're going out of here. And then there's I'm sure there's a cliffhanger where the submarine's not going to work, we can't get it to start. The next chapter starts with, okay, the submarine started now. So the submarine starts, and they take a trip up to the surface, which I think takes about 2 hours for them to reach the surface. And they get to the surface and open the submarine, and they leave the submarine. So Sheena jumps off the submarine into the water, and they can spot an island in the distance. And they're like, right, we can swim to the island, it's not a problem. It's not far enough, it's not far that we can't swim, is what I'm trying to say. Billy tries to jump off the submarine and accidentally hits the submarine on his way down and injures his leg, and he thinks he's broken his leg, but it's just a sprain. And they finally swim to the shore, and Billy picks up the stick to prop himself up like a crutch. So the stick that's washed ashore, he uses it as a crutch to kind of help himself move along. And they see a set of footprints coming up from the sea through the sand, and they're like, right, there's got to be Dr. Deep, let's follow these footprints. So they following through the trees, and they're following, and they're moving through the bushes, pushing trees out of the way, not like She-Hulk pushing trees down, but just kind of brushing branches out of the way so they can get through. And they basically come across this skeleton, and they're really confused because they're like, but they're fresh prints, so God, this is a bit weird. They're not really sure what's going on, so they go back to the beach and saying, well, things can't get any worse than this. We're stuck on an island, and we don't know where our uncle is. Things can't get any worse. And they're like, yeah, it could. And I think it's Billy that points out. It might be Sheena, I can't remember between the two. And as they look over the sand, they see there's dozens of footprints that have arrived, and they're all walked through the beach into the jungle, and they're all skeleton footprints. So they realise all the skeletons that they somehow brought to life by crashing into this pirate ship have all walked to the shore, and they're all on the island now with them. And now they're trapped on this island with nowhere to go, and all these skeletons are there as well. Anyway, they don't really have much of a plan, so the only thing they can possibly do to get any sort of luck whatsoever and try and look for help is to go into the jungle and just start looking around for somewhere safe to hide, or to try and find their uncle. And they see a cave, so they think that must be a safe place to go, so they just go towards the cave to try and investigate it. But as they're walking towards the cave, they actually don't see a pit that's hidden in the floor, and they fall into this cave. It's like a pit. No, they're not. Come on, Scott, get with it. Come on. They fall into a pit, and they try and climb out, and they can't climb out, and they try and use the stick that Billy's using to kind of help himself walk, sticking it into the sides of the pit to try and climb out. But it's so hard that they've got no choice. There's just nothing that they can do. And as they're stuck in the pit, they start to hear these voices, and they're not really sure what the voices are all about. So they listen closer, and they hear the voices are kind of not singing, but they're chanting, like a sea shanty. Anyone who knows much about pirates and sailors, they often sang on the ships maritime songs and sea shanties to make the time go by. And it will always remind me of, and if any of you knows what I'm talking about, then I love you. You're like my best friends. It always reminds me of the game called... What game? Which one is it? The Secret of Monkey Island, I think? Or The Curse of Monkey Island. Whichever one the third one was. Because part of the third one, you become a pirate. And you're on the ship with your shipmates. And as you're sailing around the seas, you start singing some really, really funny sea shanties. And it will always remind me of that. I can't remember any of them to sing. I can hear the tunes in my head, but I can't remember any of them. But if you know what I'm talking about, it's amazing. I love you. So they're stuck in this pit, and they hear this sea shanty. And so they freeze, and they're listening, and as they come closer, they can hear the shanty, or the chant, and it goes like this. The bones they crack, the bones they creep, the men come alive in the briny deep. You ended our death, you ended our sleep, the men come alive in the briny deep. So come with us, come with the men, come meet your fate with Captain Ben. I'm going to read it again, and the reason I'm going to read it again, not just because I kind of love it, but it's actually quite creepy if you think about it, that you're stuck in this pit, you've got skeletons chasing after you, and all you hear is, the bones they crack, the bones they creep, the men come alive in the briny deep. You ended our death, you ended our sleep, the men come alive in the briny deep. So come with us, come with the men, come meet your fate with Captain Ben. Yeah, so they hear this chant over and over and over. And as the chant gets louder, they look at the top of the pit, like the hole that they fell into. And all around the hole, they see these skeletons appearing, and all these skulls leaning over the side. And they can see that some of them don't have eyes, some of them have got like patches of hair attached to the skulls. Some of them have like insects crawling in and out of the skull holes. And they're just all these really nasty looking skeletons that are chanting towards them. But in a... What's the word I'm looking for? In a kind of a turn of fortune, I guess, the skeletons actually throw down a rope ladder. And even though they're trying to get the kids out so they can possibly kill them, Billy and Sheena don't really have much of a choice. They'd either stay in the pit and maybe starve to death, or they climb the rope ladder and just take the chances up there. So they climb the rope ladder and get caught in between all the skeletons, of course. And the skeletons part way, and out of the jungle comes Captain Ben One Leg. And he kind of limps towards them, and he looks kind of more humanoid than the rest of them. He still doesn't look fully human, he looks more like a zombie. But he definitely looks dead, and he's definitely kind of falling apart. But he doesn't look as skeleton as the rest of them. But behind Captain One Leg, dragged along, is Dr. Deep. He's with them as well. So they're obviously screaming for help for their uncle, and he's kind of a bit out of it. He doesn't really know what's going on. He doesn't know how he's got there, what happened. He just remembers the cloud appearing, and he then appeared on the island. But Captain Ben One Leg won't let them go. He's like, I'm not letting you go until you give me what I want. And obviously Billy and Sheena are like, but we don't have your treasure. So they're like, we don't have what you want. He's like, well, I'm not letting any of you go until you give me what I want. And they're like, but we don't have what you want. We don't have it. Like, they were looking for the treasure, but they found the ship, but they never found the treasure because they got out of there when all the skeletons started coming. And the skeletons, I don't know if they go to attack them or they go to capture them even more. I didn't write enough notes, again, a shock horror on this part, but basically Billy and Sheena get a chance to escape. And so they're running away from the skeletons, but they try to go back for Dr. Deep, and he's like, no, just go. Save yourselves, run away. So they're running through the jungle, and they're getting and they can hear the skeletons behind them as catching up with them, but they're running, and there's a bit, just to remind you that this boy's got this stick crutch, where a snake goes to attack him, and he uses the stick to kind of fling the snake out through the jungle. And as they're running through the jungle, they actually bump into two men who are on the island. And they're like, oh, thank God there's other people here as well, like, help us. We were basically like being chased by skeletons, and they tell them the story. And these humans turned out to be called Roger Baldry and Goldie Munro. So they're clearly like names from like movies from the 70s. Roger Baldry and Goldie Munro. They sound like detectives, maybe like film noir detectives, like Goldie Munro, P.I. And they're photographers, and they do like a lot of photography of like Caribbean islands and all these kind of things. So when they hear the story about Captain Man One Leg and all the skeletons coming to life and the pirate ship, they're like, "What? The legends are true? The treasure's real? Where's the ship? We'll do what we can to help you. We'll go with you. We'll get the ship. We'll get the treasure. We'll pull the treasure out of the sea and we'll give it to Captain Man One Leg and we'll get your uncle back." So they team up. But as they're trying to get back to the photographer's boat, because obviously they've got a boat as well to get to the island, their skeletons attack them and they manage to fight them off. And there's like a brief bit of like a hustle, but I think the photographers are like the main two guys that help fight off these skeletons. Yeah, they were, as well as saying they're going to get the treasure back, they're saying, although we're photographers and we want to be rich, we don't want the treasure. The water and the treasure belong to the government. It's not our property. So the photos themselves will make us rich, which is them going, again, comforting the Billy and Sheena that they're going to get the treasure back to save their uncle. So they get on the photographer's boat and I don't really know how they remember where to get there. Or did they just go towards the other boat, the Cassandra, which is the name of Dr. D's boat? I think they must go towards the Cassandra, maybe. So they actually find the location that they jumped out to get the treasure before. And the photographers open like a bag and they pull out all the screaming equipment. What am I talking about? Scott, what are you on today? They pull out the scuba equipment, not squeeby equipment. I literally cannot talk, guys. I do apologise. So, the photographers get on the boat and they travel down to find the treasure, leaving Billy and Sheena alone on this boat. But they're pretty safe. The skeletons, it's never really said if they can swim. It looks like they probably walked from the seabed up to the island, but at the same time they did float up to see them in the submarine. I don't know. I'm not sure about that logic. Anyway, they're pretty safe on this boat, but as the waves are rocking them around, they actually bump into the Cassandra boat. Yes, they must be next to it. The boats actually clash with each other, and Billy and Sheena fall over, and some of the photographers' bags with photography equipment in falls off the shelves. But one of the bags, which apparently contains camera equipment, falls open, and rather than camera equipment falling out, guns fall out. And so they're picking up these guns, and they've got rifles and assault rifles, and they're like, this is not what they said they had. They said they were all just equipment, now they've got like loads of guns. I mean, guns are a really weird thing to have on a Goosebumps book. I know they've been in one before, I think. I'm sure they have. Something in my brain says that there's been a gun in one Goosebumps book before, but I can't for the life of me remember which one it was. No, please comment, guys, if any of you listen to this, and if there is any Goosebumps book with guns in before, please let me know which ones it is, because I cannot remember. But I really can't remember any Goosebumps books with guns in. So now they're convinced that these guys are not as legitimate as they say they are. They are not photographers, they have no camera equipment, they probably are not going to just take pictures of the treasure and give them back, and they don't really know who to trust now because they can't go back to the island because of skeletons. They stay here, and there's guys who they don't know what they're up to, and they've got guns. But staying there seems like the more sensible option, so they do. The men return back from the sea with the treasure, and there's like a giant treasure chest with a red jewel skull on the top, which is probably where the Scarlet Skull ship got its name from. And I think it's probably quite a pretty chest, actually, because I like chests like if you ever played Legend of Zelda, they have some beautiful big treasure chests. So I'd like to see like a chest with a giant like red skull on the front. And the guys basically say, yeah, we're not photographers, we can see that you've been snooping around, we can see that you've seen the guns, we're not giving you the treasure, we're keeping the treasure, and we don't really care about what happens to you. So they pull off their scuba diving masks, and as they pull off the scuba diving masks, you might have guessed it by this point, their faces come off with it, and shock horror, they're skeletons as well. What? I'm a bit confused, because, I don't know, like, if the faces would come off that easily, they would have fallen off before, but at the same time, it's a Goosebumps book, I look into it a bit too much. But yeah, they take their masks off, and they reveal that they're skeletons as well, because their face falls off with it. And they begin to tell their story, and they are not part of Captain Van One Leg's team as I originally thought when I read it. I thought, oh shit, they've come into a trap and they're still with some of the skeletons of Captain Ben One Leg. Maybe he's smarter than we thought, and he's got some skeletons posted around the island in case stuff like this happens. I don't know. But the story is they're not part of Captain Ben One Leg's crew. They're actually on the second ship. Because if you remember the story from the beginning, Captain Ben One Leg and another ship were about to kind of go to battle for the treasure when Captain Ben One Leg's ship got swallowed by the Black Cloud. And yeah, when Captain Ben took the treasure, they dived into the water to get towards the boat to get the treasure back. And they were actually sucked in as the Black Cloud swallowed over them as well. So they've been stuck on the island with them trying to find a way to get the treasure back, but not knowing where the treasure is, they've got no way of none of the equipment that modern day people have, and they have no way of finding it. They know it's in the sea. That's it. Yeah, so they tell their story as every James Bond villain normally does. They tell their story just as they're about to give James Bond the chance to escape. But as they tell the story, what they told their story about them being skeletons and been there for 200 years or whatever as well, they throw Sheena overboard, which doesn't seem like that much of a big deal because they're right next to Sheena's ship anyway. And Billy attacks them with sticks, and I think he gets thrown overboard as well. I didn't really remember what happens at this point, so I'm so sorry. I have read this book maybe 2-3 months ago. And now that the kids are out of the way, Roger and Goldie Monroe, P.I., they actually go to look at the treasure chest, and Roger grabs the skull. Or they both grab the skull, I'm not really too sure. They're examining the chest, and they grab the skull, and it's this massive white light and a burst of electricity, and they start being electrocuted, and he's dancing around the air as their whole body is electrocuted, even though it's just bone. So whether bone would get electrocuted, I don't know, because we only get electrocuted because we've got electricity in our body and our skin burns. So whether bones would, I don't know, but I don't know. Oh yeah, they may get electrocuted. Ignore me, because yeah, they've got skin, it's just their faces that'll come off. Ugh, Scott, you're a fucking moron today. And the heads fly off if they get electrocuted, and them two die. So, yeah, that's about that. Those skeletons dead. Billy and Sheena get back on the boat, and they actually move the treasure chest back onto the Cassandra without touching the skull, because it seems the rest of the chest is fine. It's just the skull that's got this curse on it. So they move the chest over to the Cassandra, and as they get back onto their ship, or their boat, the skull appears out of the water. So nearby, the pirate ship just floats up out of the water. And obviously on the boat is Captain Ben at the helm, looking over at them with Dr. Deep near them. How Dr. Deep survived that, I have no idea, because he was clearly underwater. Goosebumps logic. Put it down to Goosebumps logic. Basically, yeah, they're face to face with Captain Ben. Captain Ben can see the treasure. It's their face off. There's nowhere they can go now. And Captain Ben says, if you want your uncle back, give me what is mine. And he's like, well, we've got your treasure here. We'll give you the treasure back. You take the treasure, we take the uncle back. And he's like, I don't want my treasure. I want my leg back. And then it clicks. The whole time they've been on this island, Billy has been walking around with Captain Ben's leg. I'll comment on that later on. But yeah, it's kind of a good twist. All along, obviously, you're just convinced that Captain Ben wants his treasure back. But this stick that Billy uses from the start is a crutch, and he uses it to fight off skeletons, fight off snakes, and to help climb out of the pit. Or it fails, but all the time he's been carrying around Captain Ben's leg, which he must have lost a long time ago, maybe by a crocodile. And she was like, yeah, I want my leg back, not my bloody treasure. And they're like, how? And Billy goes, oh shit, like they realise what's going on. And they say, how do we know if we give you the leg back, you're going to give us our uncle, because you're a pirate, you can't be trusted. And he basically says, I'm not going to give him your uncle back, I'm a pirate, I'm going to take the stick, I'm going to take the treasure, and you're all just going to come and join me at the bottom of the sea, and you can all die, or I presume become like part of his skeleton crew. So at least he's pretty honest. He kind of goes, I'm not fucking about here. I'm going to take the treasure, I'm going to take my leg, and you lot can take a running jump for all I care. And then Billy gets an idea. He begins to think of how he can get out of this situation. And what's the one skill that we know from this book that he's already learnt? He knows how to use the spear, and he knows how to aim to catch a fish, and a fish is a very small target. So, Billy's like, fine, have your leg back. Grabs the leg, which he was using to stand up, to help walk along and stuff, and aims at Captain Ben one leg, and like he is using a fishing spear, he pulls back and launches it at him like a javelin. The leg flies through the air and punches through Captain Ben's skeleton chest, and Captain Ben falls overboard and presumably dies because the Scarlet Skull starts falling apart. Literally, the masts are falling apart, the skeletons are falling apart, the shipboards are all falling apart, the cannons are falling off. I don't even know if the ship's got cannons, but I'm making this up because it sounds more dramatic. Basically, the ship literally crumbles into pieces. So they defeated him. All they had to do was throw the leg through the chest of the skeleton skull. No, that's not English. They had to throw the leg through the chest of Captain Ben, one leg. And they killed him, and the Scarlet Skull broke away, and that's it. They're all back to being fairly normal now. All the skeletons have been destroyed. Dr. D floats away from the wreckage of the Scarlet Skull and climbs back onto the Cassandra. And he climbs onto board, and he basically says, we're in some kind of other land, other realm, like the land of the dead. So as well as being a marine biologist, he is a treasure hunter, and clearly an expertise on the occult. Because he knows somehow that we're in the land of the dead. And the only way to get back to the land of the living is to find another black cloud and sail through it. Okay. As far as we're aware, there's only been one black cloud in 200 years, because the only life forms we saw on this island, is Captain Ben's crew and the two guys that came through with that cloud. So magically, Goosebumps logic, a black cloud appears out of nowhere, and they float through it and travel back to whatever island whatever ocean they were floating in before. And yeah, this convenient black cloud appears, and they float through, and they're back in the real world. But the chest actually disappears with it. The chest and the land, which belongs to the land of the dead now, that actually falls through with it. But the Scarlet Skull, for some reason, doesn't disappear. That actually stays with them. Weirdly enough. But they can actually pick it up now. It's not, the curse is gone. The curse stayed in the land of the dead. So they've got this really expensive jewel now, which they can either use themselves, but knowing Dr. Deep, he'll want to donate it to some sort of wildlife, dolphin, mermaid fund type thing. So yeah, they're back to the normal life. They've got the skull. They can do whatever they want with it, and so they go to the radio to kind of report back to the base to say where they're stuck in the middle of the ocean. And as they're messaging through, like, Dr. D to base, can anyone hear me? They hear a crackling sound, and from the speaker, they hear this chant. The bones they crack, the bones they creep, the men come alive in the briny deep. You ended our death, you ended our sleep, the men come alive in the briny deep. And that's how the book ends. They're all back to normal, but somehow these skeletons have maybe come back to life. I don't think I made the end sound as dramatic as the book does. It's kind of a bit spooky, like they're back to normal life, back there in the land of the dead, and they hear this chant coming from a microphone. It's very stereotypical horror film, like where you pick up a microphone or a phone and you hear this chant, like Freddy Krueger, and he's like, I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. Anyone who's not seen that film will have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah, so that's the end of The Creep from the Deep. On to the open plot points. I haven't put these in any particular order, but the main ones that I can think of talking about, which are kind of, I wish were slightly more explained than the book does, because it kind of leaves some big gaping holes. The main ones I can think of are when Dr. D gets taken from the submarine, the Black Cloud. Why? Why does the Black Cloud randomly appear then? And just take Dr. D of all, like, why wouldn't it take all three of them? If it took a boatload of pirates, including two that were in the water nearby, Why would it not? What? My mind has gone completely blank. What am I talking about? I'm sorry, guys. I'm really not with it today. Yeah, why would they? If it's taking a boatload of pirates, why would it not take Billy and Sheena with him? I think it's a little bit confusing. If there was some sort of cloud logic that they came up with, maybe it only takes adults, then I could have accepted it. Like some sort of one-line, throwaway line that kind of made some sort of explanation as to why Billy and Sheena didn't leave the submarine, only Dr. D did. Then I would have been okay with that. But at the same time, the cloud must have took them through to the land of the dead, because they go to the island where the captain is and where Dr. D is. So if the cloud took them into the land of the dead, why did it take Dr. D out of the submarine? Why didn't it just leave him in the submarine? It's really confusing. I mean, the more I think about it, the more confusing it gets. It's kind of not tight logic on what this black cloud does, other than transport you to this land. So that I kind of wish was a slightly more explained, really, because it was just a bit of one of those things that my mind couldn't get away from. Like, why are they here? But Dr. D doesn't. If it was like a different Goosebumps book, maybe where Dr. D got transported to the land of the dead and they didn't, and they had to find another black cloud, yeah, I still would have been like, why did they not get transported at the same time? But I would have been a bit more okay with it because they just didn't get sucked into the cloud. Dr. D did. But because they actually went through the cloud as well, but stayed in the submarine when he didn't, it's a little bit confusing. So, the logic on this cloud and the land of the dead's a little bit evil. It's never really explained why the skull on the chest is cursed either, but I'm not too bothered about because it's very piratey. It's very stereotypical pirate. Cursed treasure, kind of maps and jewels and all this kind of stuff. So, that I'm okay with. That's not explained and that's fine. Or if it's not explained, I don't remember it being explained. The only two other things that really bothered me, other than the marine biologist now being a treasure hunter and a leader on the occult, is why Captain Ben Legg didn't just say it from the very beginning, I want my leg back. He's like, you've got what's mine, I want what's mine, give it me back. It reminds me of, I don't know what horror films or TV programs, but I've seen it before, where the bad guy wants something, and it's something really easy to give to them. Or like a ghost wants some sort of item to kind of move on from the afterlife, but it haunts people all the time and scares them instead. Instead of just going, this is what I want, fair enough, the book would have ended really quickly. But if he'd have just said from the beginning, I want my leg back, you've got my leg, fair enough, they still would have had the whole hoo-ha of the fact that Captain Ben was going to kill them and take them to the bottom of the ocean. But at least that he would have got his leg back really quickly. Yeah. And the only other one that really bothers me is why throwing the leg through his chest killed him and the ship and the skeletons, or did it kill the skeletons? Because the skeletons reappeared. I'm going to guess the ship is linked to kind of Captain Ben, and that destroying his skeleton or puncturing where his heart would potentially be, maybe kind of they're all kind of linked and they all disintegrate because Captain Ben's the leader, and the curse or there's land of the dead logic applies that, like on vampire things, sometimes if you kill the sire, the vampires in that bloodline then die as well. Like one of those things, you kill the captain and all his crew and the ship die. It's a little bit iffy, especially with the skeletons returning at the end. Does that mean, yeah, Captain Ben and the ship disappeared, but some of the skeletons still survived, and they may have travelled through the cloud with with Dr. D back to the land of the land of the living? That'd be a nice twist. That'd be a good setup for a sequel, but I'm not too sure. So there's not many major points that kind of go, eh, what? The main one for me really is the rules of this cloud. It's very fluid in what the cloud does and who it takes, and there's no explanation as to why. On to my least favourite cliffhanger, as I do with every Goosebumps and Shivers book so far, and we'll be doing Ghost of Fear Street, because I'm a big nerdy nerd. And like I've always said, anyone who reads these books knows that they are known for their cliffhangers and for their ended chapters and the fake outs. So my least favourite one, let me find it, it's on Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Sorry, I had to flick through it because I forgot to write it down again. So if you've got the book with you, I'm tread to chapter 10. And I read the last little bit. And the start of the chapter 11, like I normally do, to show why I don't like the cliffhanger. Panic swept over me. My heart pounded as loudly... No, can't even talk now. Panic swept over me. My heart pounded as loudly as the scores on the glass. I couldn't think straight. Bam, bam. I slapped wildly at the ignition button. It won't go, Sheena, I cried. It won't go. And then on to chapter 11. Bam, bam, bam. The ugly scores battered the glass. Sheena's eyes were wild. Her face turned bright red. She pounded the control panel with both fists, and the engine rumbled to life. The reason that I chose this as my least favourite cliffhanger is not because it's a bad cliffhanger, because being stuck at the bottom of the ocean with a skeleton surrounding your submarine and it's not coming to life and there's no power, yeah, that is quite scary. The reason that I chose it as my least favourite is because there's no payoff to it. It's very much like, it's very typical Goosebumps fake out in the, something grabbed my ankle. Oh wait, it was just my friend. Something grabbed my ankle. Oh no, wait, it was a tree branch. Something jumped out of the darkness. Oh wait, it was my pet, cat. It was, the boat's not coming to life. Oh wait, yeah, it is. It was just a bit, if they had slightly more after it, maybe something started to go wrong with the ship. Somehow the skeletons were actually potentially making their way into the ship. Maybe they started to break through the glass, which I'm not sure how that would have gone, because obviously the water would have poured in. But if they'd upped the stakes a bit more after that, I'd have been well on board. But at the same time, my favourite cliffhanger, at least what I wrote down as my favourite, although there is a couple that I like in here. I like the chant. I really like the chant I read before. I like the fact that when they think they're in safety, the guys turned out to be evil as well, although I thought it was pretty obvious coming. My favourite cliffhanger was the end of chapter 9. So just the chapter before, my least favourite one. And which was, I saw her blue eyes bulge. I turned to follow her stare. We both screamed when we saw it. The grinning face in the water, staring in at us. And it's basically about all the skeletons that come to life and start peering in at the ship through the porthole. I thought that was really spooky. Because, I mean, I'll get onto the cover in a minute, but I thought that would have been a perfect image for the cover. But I'll talk about it in a minute, but just the image is quite a scary one of being stuck in the middle of the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean, in a submarine, nowhere to go, no foreseeable chance of escape, and you're looking around and all these skeletons start appearing at the windows. That is quite a spooky image for a child. Especially if you're like me, you've got a fear of being underwater. I really have a fear of being underwater, like a massive fear of being underwater. I don't ever go swimming anymore. I'm not too bad, like, maybe at a swimming pool I'd be okay. But particularly with the sea and the oceans, I just won't do it. And it all stems from watching Jaws when I was a kid, really. Yeah, that film really scared the living shit out of me as a kid. And I'll talk about that more in my next review of The Ghost of Fear Street, because Jaws is actually mentioned by one of the main characters in that book as a book that he's reading. So I will leave the Jaws for now. Yeah, so being underwater and all these scary things happening with no control, it is spooky, and that's why I like that cliffhanger, because I didn't know where this book was going. I didn't know, other than the fact that the blurb mentions about pirates and captain things and wanting the treasure back. I didn't know if the whole book took place underwater, and maybe they go onto the pirate ship and it spends the time there. But I just thought it was quite a good cliffhanger. It was quite creepy. Yeah, that was my favourite one. I liked a few of them. The chant is one of my other favourites as well, because I think the chant is really, it's like a nice little touch. In terms of the cover, I don't like the cover. It's a shame because I love the cover for Revenge of the Living Dummy, but for Creep from the Deep, I really don't like the cover. It's not that it's not a good image. If the book was about some giant eel, fine, not a problem. I'd be all on board for this cover. But it's not. The actual cover, because they always try and make the cover like part of one of the story parts. The reason that I didn't mention anything to do with an eel in my kind of synopsis of the story is because it only lasts about one sentence, maybe two. Billy basically has a daydream that he's in the submarine and this giant eel bursts through the porthole. And that's it. That's as much as what happens. So the fact that they chose this as a cover really pisses me off, because it's such a wasted opportunity. Because I picked this up, before reading the back of it, I thought, this might be a nice underwater scary adventure with some underwater monster. So I was all on board for it. Read the back of the cover, and it just mentions Billy, Sheena and Dr. Deep going looking for treasure, leading to a 200-year-old sea captain rising from the dead. Right, and maybe the sea captain has these monsters that work for him. Kind of like if you've seen The Rescuers. The evil lady in that has 2 alligators that she kind of keeps as like pets that she water skis on. But no, it's nothing to do with the story, and that really pisses me off. Because it's such a wasted opportunity for a good cover. The cover I would have done, and I might try and do this for all, I've said it so far on A Ghastly Shade of Green. I mentioned it on that one. I liked Animal Rebellion. I liked Adventures of the Living Dummy. I did mention it for Ghostly Playmate. But basically, on any book that I do and I don't like the cover, I'll suggest a cover that I think would be a lot better. And for this one, it's simple, really. I think you've got 2 choices. Well, you've got a few choices, but the 2 that I would choose from is an image from when they're in the submarine at the start, because you can already see the porthole in the cover of the fish monster thing. So basically, take him out, keep the porthole, but have one main skull in the front and centre of the image of a skeleton, maybe with like an eyeball hanging out and some teeth missing, right against the porthole, and maybe some skeletons in the background and the ship. I think that would be a lot better image. It'd be very relatable to the story because the skeletons of the ship are the main focus on this story. I think that would be a nice spooky image with the loads of skeletons floating away in the background and the pirate ship. And also I would possibly do the bit where they're in the pit and they look up, and just have an image as like a point of view image of one of the characters looking up from the pit and seeing all the skeletons standing around the top of the pit, looking down at them. Maybe with a rope ladder as well, I'm not sure. Because that'd be quite spooky as well, like a trapped, and the only place to go is towards all these skeletons that are waiting for you. They're the covers that I would have done, but unfortunately they didn't go for that. They decided to go for a 2-second moment that happens in the start of the book, so I'm not happy with that at all. Bad work, Steve Scott, who designed the book. I'm not blaming the artist because it's not his fault, but I'm blaming the designer, because don't get me wrong, the picture is great. It's a nice image. It's just not a good cover for the book, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'll get on to my review of the story. The Deep Trouble have never been my favourites, from what I can remember, because they're not very supernatural. They've got slight bits of supernatural to them, but they're not like monsters and ghouls. I've realised I've been talking 50 minutes. This is going to be over an hour again, isn't it? Right, let's get through this review as quick as possible. It's not one of my favourite series, but I really enjoyed this one because I enjoyed all the skeletons and the captain and everything that came with that, like them being trapped in the submarine, trapped in a pit, and all the chanting skeletons that are falling apart, and how the skeletons are fairly easy to destroy. You can like knock their heads off or whatever, and that's about it. I like there's a treasure hunt, and it kind of reminded me of like things I used to read like and watch as a kid. Like I was a big fan of Monkey Island, and that was all about battling like undead zombie pirates while looking for treasures. And underwater stuff scares me, so the underwater stuff I didn't like because I don't like being underwater. There was a few plot holes with it. It's fair to say there are, especially with the cloud, which I mentioned before. But I enjoyed the book. It went at quite a good pace. There was never really many boring parts. I think the fact that it was 20-30 pages shorter than it should have been, because it's obviously got the Horrorland bit at the end, didn't really harm it on this book. I feel like it was good, like I say, good pace. It was never boring, but it never felt like they were rushing it as well, because you had a few different antagonists, but they still managed to kind of give enough their own time to kind of understand their motives. And yeah, other than the Black Cloud and a bit more explanation to that, I think it's a good length. Shame about the cover, but on the whole, I liked the story. It was enjoyable. I was never bored. It's a good second entry. It's really different from the first one, which I thought was important. First one was all that a small tale in a house about the sister this daughter who is having trouble with a dummy and a cousin who's staying. Next book's all about this like underwater adventure, travelling to tropical islands and battling hordes of skeleton pirates. So it was really different from the first one, which I appreciate, because sometimes if you read these books, they can be quite similar book to book. Not all of them, but every now and again, sometimes you can see a lot of recurring things happening. This was very different. So on the whole, I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as The Living Dummy because Slappy is obviously iconic as a bad guy, or yes, it was Mr. Bad Boy, but you know, just dummies coming to life in general I find quite creepy. Whereas Captain Ben One Leg had a good backstory, he didn't really do a lot. He kidnapped Dr. D and that was it. He wasn't overly threatening in that manner. He kind of threatened to kill them and trap them and then take them to the bottom of the sea, but he never really did anything. So the antagonist wasn't as scary for me. But overall, I enjoyed it. In terms of the rating, I'm going to give it, purely because I did enjoy it, but there was some plot holes and things that maybe could have been slightly better. I'm going to give it a B? Yeah, a B, because I did enjoy it. I was going to give it a B-, but reading back through my notes and skimming through it before I did the review, I did actually really enjoy this book more than I remember enjoying it. So I'm going to give it a B. So I've been from an A. Was it an A- I gave Revenge of the Living Dummy? Yeah, I think it was. Now to a B. The next one in the series is Monster Blood for Breakfast. I'm not going to say any of my thoughts on that book yet until we get to the review. The next two books that I will be reviewing, I finished The Creature from Club Laguna, which is number 20... Oh, God. I did this last time. I want to say 21, 23, 21. I'm not sure. It's number 20-something in the Ghost of Fear Street. So that'll be my next review, which will be up in maybe tomorrow, next couple of days. And the next book, which I brought out of the little thing that I keep pieces of paper in, the next Shivers book will be number 13, The Spider Kingdom. What I might try and do is, rather than going through at the end of each series... But yeah, so that's Creep from the Deep. I gave it a B. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you've got any good cliffhangers which I didn't mention, any cliffhangers that you hated, any plot holes that I didn't talk about, or anything that I forgot about that cloud that is important, that makes things make more sense, please comment and let me know what you think of the review and the book itself. And yeah, thank you for listening, guys. Take care of yourselves, and let me know what you think.